sharing his biggest regrets in Congress. The outgoing Wisconsin congressman telling the Washington Post he regrets not paying off the national debt and failing to pass an immigration overhaul. One generous San Diego businessman traveled to Northern California with 2 suitcases full of $1 million for members of the Paradise High School community. The school survived the campfire largely unscathed, but the surrounding area, including many students' homes, were impacted. Students expressed shock and gratitude for a gift that came with no strings attached.
I was shocked, and this guy hasn't even been here before, and it's so kind of him to do it. And people don't realize how much it helps, like even the small stuff.
So it's really just helping us all at this point, and anybody can use it for anything, and it's just great for us to have it.
And the good news is 980 students and 105 teachers and staff members each received checks worth $1,000. 90-year-old Bob Wilson said his fond memories of high school inspired him to give to the school. When we thank him for that, indeed. And thank you for joining us today. I'm Dana Perino. Here now, Shep Smith.
It's noon on the West Coast, 3 o'clock in New York, where President Trump's former personal lawyer and fixer has pleaded guilty again. Michael Cohen admits he lied to Congress about plans to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, saying he was trying to stick to the candidate Trump's political message. The president calls Cohen a liar and weak. We'll hear more from both sides. The president also calling off his meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. His explanation ahead. And Stormy Daniels says she never wanted to sue President Trump, but her lawyer did it anyway. Reporting begins now.
Now, Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
Our reporting begins with President Trump's former attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, admitting he lied to Congress about contacts he had with the Kremlin about building a Trump Tower in Moscow, and that he intentionally misled the lawmakers about how much President Trump was involved. Michael Cohen pleaded guilty this morning at federal court in Manhattan. The plea was part of a deal with the special counsel Robert Mueller in exchange for Cohen's cooperation in the Russia investigation. According to new records, court records, Cohen now admits that he was in talks with the Russian President Vladimir Putin's right-hand man and spokesman to get the Moscow Trump Tower project approved, and even got an invitation to St. Petersburg. This was all going on while then candidate Donald Trump was running for president, as the Kremlin interfered with our democracy, as Russian hackers stole emails from the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. Michael Cohen previously told Congress under oath that the Moscow project was terminated in January of 2016. Just before the Iowa caucuses formally started the presidential race. Michael Cohen now admits that was a lie, and that discussions about the project were still going on as late as June of that year, and that he not only did agree to travel to Moscow, he says he asked the president about going as well. Those trips never happened, and President Trump claims Michael Cohen is making up a story to get a lighter prison sentence.
He's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence. So he's lying about a project that everybody knew about. I mean, we were very open with it. When I run for president, that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to do business. I was doing a lot of different things when I was running. After I won, obviously, I don't do business. From January 20th, we had a position to possibly do a deal to build a building of some kind in Moscow. I decided not to do it. The primary reason, there could have been other reasons, but the primary reason, it was very simple. I was focused on running for president. There would be nothing wrong if I did do it. I was running my business while I was campaigning.
So the president says Michael Cohen was lying to the special prosecutor in an attempt to get a reduced sentence. If you lie to a special prosecutor, your sentence is not reduced. It adds on to the lies you already told. Just days before President Trump took office, he sent a tweet denying any links to Russia. Quoting here, "Russia has never tried to use leverage over me. I have nothing to do with Russia. No deals, no loans, no nothing." The vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Democrat from Virginia, Mark Warner, says Michael Cohen's confession is just one example of why the Mueller investigation has to be allowed to continue unimpeded.
This is one more example of one of the president's closest allies lying about their ties to Russia and Russians. And again, at least first blush looking, it's just remarkable that you had the president's personal lawyer still dealing on a Trump Tower project through the whole campaign, and it appears even into 2017.
Michael Cohen's guilty plea comes just days after the president provided written answers to some of the special counsel questions. Whether those answers match the sworn testimony from Cohen, we do not yet know. The chief intelligence correspondent Catherine Herridge reporting live from Washington.
Well, Shep, a draft statement prepared by Cohen's lawyers for Congress is at the heart of Cohen's guilty plea today, lying to congressional investigators about this 2016 Moscow real estate proposal. Now, based on the new timeline provided by Cohen, the negotiations with Moscow continued well into the presidential campaign and during the same month of the controversial June 2016 Trump Tower meeting. Cohen told Congress in the written statement, quote, the proposal was under consideration at the Trump Organization from September 2015 until the end of January 2016, but he told the court this morning, as you noted, that it lasted another 5 months. Cohen also told Congress, quote, I never considered asking Mr. Trump to travel to Russia in connection with this proposal. To the best of my knowledge, Mr. Trump was never in contact with anyone about this proposal other than me on 2 occasions, but Cohen told the court today the discussions were far more extensive. What we don't know right now is the extent of Cohen's cooperation and whether it extends beyond the Moscow real estate project. The report suggests, in fact, it may, Shep.
And Fox News has obtained an email between Michael Cohen and a Russian-American business developer very close to Vladimir Putin.
That's right. These emails are from Felix Sater. He's a business developer with strong ties to Putin, who told the Senate Intelligence Committee last year that he was like the intermediary, the kind of go-to guy for the Moscow real estate project. At the very least, Sater is a colorful character. He's a Russian-born real estate developer turned U.S. citizen and described in some media reporting as a guy who plays real close to the edge, also an alleged FBI informant who has boasted about his ties to the Russian president. And in this 2015 email to Cohen, Sater writes, buddy, our boy can become president of the USA and we can engineer it. I will get all of Putin's team to buy in on this. I will manage this process. There is no one on this planet that wants Donald elected more than I do. As you know, the Moscow real estate deal fell through and the president and Cohen did not go to Moscow. But the emails certainly seem interesting, to say the least, Shep.
Catherine Herridge reporting live from Washington. Let's turn to Jeffrey Kramer now, former federal prosecutor, assistant U.S. attorney, now the managing director at Berkeley Research Group, which is a global consulting firm. Good to see you again.
Good afternoon.
The lying has been well documented. The lying was not in question before today or last week or last month. The lying is something that has happened repeatedly by members of President Trump's inner circle regarding contacts with Russia. But does this particular admission of a lie give us any insight into why the lies might be happening?
You know, I think it does, and we have to just step back for a moment. It does give some context as to why different people might be lying. Specifically, there's some sort of business relationship contemplated, not gone through, but contemplated during the election. The problem is with answering that question is we only know one more piece of the puzzle today. But I think it's safe to say that today's plea by Mr. Cohen is clearly the first time that we've gotten that connection between Russian business interests and the Trump organization. So I think it's a consequential day, let's put it that way.
So the lying, it would now appear, is at least in part about money.
Correct. Before, we've been talking about WikiLeaks, as you indicated before, Mr. Stone and Mr. Corsi. That's one thread. Now we're getting into the finances, which has always been, frankly, the more interesting and fruitful area that Mr. Mueller could be pursuing, because it's going to get to the president's tax returns, one would assume. And once you start getting into the finances, as you deal with any sort of conspiracy or fraud or anything in the white-collar area, it always comes down to money, or 9 out of 10 times, and this is probably no exception.
The the money laundering has always been in the ether here as this investigation goes on. There are a lot of different examples. For instance, back in 2004, when the president bought the house for, what was it, $45 million, and then sold it to a Russian oligarch for $90 million, and there were a lot of instances of possible crossover there. This avenue of money laundering is, especially given the Deutsche Bank incidents today overseas, is that coming together as well?
We certainly see a little more light into it, but you're right. Money laundering is always a thread that gets pulled, because when you're looking at any area where money could play a factor, there's always going to be money laundering, because you have to get the money out. There's no sense doing any scam or fraud or whatever it might be if you can't get the money out. And we saw that materialize with Mr. Manafort and the machinations that he and Mr. Gates went through. And you're right, Donald Trump had some of these interactions as a private developer. Not really shocking. I think you'd see that in a lot of large real estate transactions. But as we transition now into him being president of the United States, it certainly takes a heightened interest. When you throw in the Russians, it throws it even more into the spotlight, and I think is going to connect to that Trump Tower meeting. All these things, there's a thread that goes through all of this, and I think today was an important part.
You said that, and you have said repeatedly, that what Mueller is doing is sending out cards, warnings to people. If you lie to us, you'll be indicted for lying to us. Are there others within the Trump family even who might have reason for concern regarding this matter at hand?
I think if an objective observer was to look at this, you'd have to say yes. We know from Mr. Cohen's allocution and what he said today that there were others in the Trump organization that knew about the time period of when these conversations were going on and were aware that a trip to Russia was discussed with then candidate Donald Trump. So if you're one of those people in Trump organization who has talked to either Mr. Mueller or congressional hearing, and you towed the line, in other words, you said the same lies that Mr. Cohen did, I think you're having a nervous night tonight.
Are you referring to Donald Trump Jr. or others?
I think Donald Trump Jr. is certainly one. That's a logical inference given what we know to date and Mr. Cohen's allocution. Those questions would certainly have been asked of Donald Jr. They may have been asked, as you indicated before, on the written questions submitted to the president. They may have been asked, and probably were, of others in the Trump organization. And anyone who said that it was January is when it stopped and that there was no trip planned to Russia, they're looking at an indictment square in the face right now.
One more thing. The president said that Michael Cohen is weak and that he's lying. What would your experience be about a defendant in this position lying on this matter?
You know, I saw that. It's hard to wrap your head around. You got to put weak to the side. That doesn't mean anything. In my experience as a prosecutor in New York and then here in Chicago for a dozen or so years, defendants lie. They lie regularly. That's really not a big thing. Nobody lies about lying. You know, that's a hard one to wrap your head around.
You've never seen
because if you're I've never seen that. I doubt many prosecutors have. If you're lying about lying to cut a deal, that makes no sense. If you're telling the truth in the first instance, then you've got no jeopardy. But it's an odd one to lie about lying, the result of which then could send you to prison. That's just illogical.
So excuse number one for what happened today is illogical and something you've never seen.
I think that's a fair statement.
Jeff Kramer, live with us from Chicago. Jeffrey, thank you.
Certainly.
Ahead, much more on Michael Cohen's guilty plea, including reaction from Capitol Hill. Top Democrats are calling for a deeper look into the Trump organization's financial ties to Russia and ramping up their push to make sure the special counsel in the Russia investigation is protected. That's coming up as reporting continues on this Thursday. Cohen admits that he lied to Congress about a Trump organization real estate project in Russia. The president says Cohen lied when he admitted lying. Now, the incoming head of the House Intelligence Committee, the California Democrat Adam Schiff, says congressional investigators will try to bring Cohen back for more testimony and to examine whether the Russians laundered money through the Trump organization. The chief congressional correspondent Mike Emanuel reporting live from Capitol Hill.
Shep, good afternoon. No surprise, some lawmakers are saying this afternoon that there must be consequences if someone's found to have lied to a Senate committee.
There's evidence that we can point to that they didn't tell the truth, and certainly, but I don't want to say specific to anybody right now. But yeah, this is not a good development. Somebody conceding that they lied to Congress.
The next chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee warned against reading too much into this Michael Cohen news.
It seems like a process crime. I don't know if it's got anything to do with colluding with the Russians in terms of the campaign. Just let Mueller do his job, and hopefully he'll finish this sometime relatively soon, and we'll know more.
And other Republicans are clearly anxious for Special Counsel Robert Mueller to finish his investigation in a timely fashion.
My biggest concern in terms of the Mueller investigation. Let's get it all wrapped up. And it was to me like there's some movement in terms of, I don't want to tell Mr. Mueller how to do his job. He doesn't need my counsel on that. He seems quite able. But we do need to wrap it up.
There's a lot of that on the Republican side, that Mueller should be allowed to complete his work, but they hope he wraps it up soon. Shep?
What else are you hearing from Democrats, Mike?
Well, a veteran Democrat here on Capitol Hill says, make no mistake about it, Michael Cohen, someone who worked very closely with Mr. Trump over the years, his guilty plea will turn out to be a very big deal.
We're going to see collusion with the Russians. Whether that goes directly to the president, I do not know, but it's clearly the people that were around him in the campaign. I think this is going to be a very sad chapter of American history.
The expected next chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff of California, said, quote, now more than ever, the special counsel must be protected from any interference by Trump or Acting Attorney General Whitaker. Our committee and the new House majority will use all of its powers to preserve the independence of our justice system and ensure that no one is above the law. And other Democrats are trying to read between the lines here.
This Cohen guilty plea is another piece in the mosaic that could really provide a deeper insight into the full picture of the president's liability here, criminal culpability and conspiracy involving Michael Cohen have always been front and center.
Adding to the tension here on Capitol Hill, the uncertainty of when we'll hear from Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his big picture findings. Shep?
Mike Emanuel reporting live from Capitol Hill. The Kremlin was apparently caught off guard after President Trump canceled his meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Coming up, the latest from Moscow and a live report from Argentina, where President Trump is expected to arrive tonight, President Vladimir Putin. And a meeting was planned, Putin and Trump in Argentina. An hour later, the president tweeted from Air Force One that the summit's off. The Kremlin had made the announcement. The leaders were set to meet this weekend. President Trump says he called it off because Russia still hasn't released Ukrainian ships and sailors it captured over the weekend. The news appeared to catch the Kremlin unaware. Its spokesman said he had no official information on the president's decision. Probably learned from Twitter. The chief White House correspondent John Roberts reporting live from the site of the summit in Buenos Aires.
Shep, good afternoon to you. He learned about it on Twitter, as we all did. Dmitry Peskov just earlier this morning, Russia time, had said that Washington had just called to confirm the meeting between President Putin of Russia and the U.S. President Donald Trump. The president had said earlier in the week that he was thinking about canceling it because of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, but hadn't made a final decision. Then he'd barely been aboard Air Force One for but a few minutes when he made it official with that tweet, which read, quote, based on the fact that ships and sailors have not been returned to Ukraine from Russia, I have decided it would be best for all parties concerned to cancel my previously scheduled meeting in Argentina with President Vladimir Putin. I look forward to a meaningful summit again as soon as this situation is resolved. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the press secretary, said the decision was made after the president read a detailed report about what was going on in the Ukraine there at the hands of the Russians, and the president was briefed by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the Chief of Staff John Kelly, and as well as the National Security Advisor John Bolton. On his way out the door this morning, though, as you mentioned, the president indicated that the meeting appeared to be still on, though he said he could change his mind. Listen here.
I probably will be meeting with President Putin. We haven't terminated that meeting. I was thinking about it, but we haven't. They'd like to have it. I think it's a very good time to have the meeting. I'm getting a full report on the plane as to what happened with respect to that, and that will determine what I'm going to be doing.
The president said there that he thought it was a very good time to have the meeting, but politically he was under a lot of pressure to not meet with Vladimir Putin because of the situation in Ukraine and the fact that Russia was still holding Ukrainian assets and personnel. Just sitting down with Putin at this G20 summit could have been looked upon as, if not rewarding him, at the very least turning a blind eye. And then all of this Cohen stuff, Shep, certainly didn't help with the optics of a meeting with Putin. So the president has decided to shelve it for now. But the two leaders are going to have to meet again at some point. We just don't know when at this point. Shep?
John Roberts reporting live from Buenos Aires. More now on Russia's reaction to President Trump canceling his meeting with President Putin. Rich Edson reporting live from the State Department.
Well, Chef, the Russian government, according to Russian state media and spokesperson Dmitry Peskov for the Kremlin, says that this now gives Vladimir Putin, the fact that this meeting is canceled, a couple of more hours to have useful meetings with other world leaders at the G20 summit. The Kremlin is saying, according to Russian state media, that they just found out about this through the president's tweet, that they had been planning this for days now, and that the schedule had them meeting with the President Trump and President Putin, on Saturday afternoon. That's not happening anymore. The State Department spokesperson just said that the U.S. has sent a strong message to the Russian government about all of this, and that the consequence is continued isolation for Russia. This, of course, goes back to that incident this past weekend. The Secretary of State had described this as an attack that's an aggressive action and called on Russia to return Ukraine ships and its sailors. They are still in Russian custody, and so the administration decided they weren't going to have this meeting. Now, the Russian government previewed this meeting a little bit. They said they were talking about security, disarmament, regional conflicts. That very likely means, first off, the treaty, the intermediate range missile treaty that the United States said it was going to withdraw from. The Russian government wanted to discuss that. There's the fighting in Syria. There's the continued problems in Ukraine, which was highlighted this past weekend by the seizure of those Ukrainian ships and sailors. And there's also the host of sanctions that the West has against the Russian government. You now even have Western governments, European governments, who are calling for more sanctions against Russia because of what occurred this past weekend near Ukraine. Back to you.
Rich Edson live at the State Department. Ukraine's president calling on NATO to send support to the sea there between Ukraine and Russia. That's where 3 Ukrainian ships were apparently headed on Sunday when Russian forces seized them and 24 sailors. They're still being held. But Ukraine and Russia have an agreement that both nations have to sign off on allowing foreign warships in that area. Trey Yingst reporting live from our Middle East newsroom.
Shep, while Ukraine is not a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, commonly referred to as NATO, it is considered a partner country. And right now, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is calling on the group for military assistance. Today, Poroshenko asked for the deployment of NATO warships in the Sea of Azov and accused Russia of wanting to take over all of Ukraine after a firefight on Sunday between the two countries off the coast of Crimea. In an interview with a German newspaper, Poroshenko said, quote, Putin wants the old Russian Empire back. This as tensions continue to flare between Russia and Ukraine, and a Ukrainian minister said today that Russia is blocking 2 of the country's major seaports. Ukraine's infrastructure minister said that 35 vessels headed towards 2 different Ukrainian ports in the Sea of Azov are being prevented by the Russians from carrying out normal operations. Ukrainian authorities also say the Kerch Strait is being blocked for Ukrainian ships. Now, the Kremlin is denying that the Russians are doing anything to block movement in the area, and Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov saying today he isn't aware of any restrictions that exist, adding that sometimes weather conditions can affect navigation there. Now, Shep, all reports and authority statements in Ukraine do indicate that the Russians are indeed blocking movement of Ukrainian ships in the region. I did speak today with a resident in the town of Berdyansk. That resident does live in one of those port cities, and they did tell Fox News, quote, we're trying to keep calm and hope for the best, adding Ukraine is really in need of support from the world right now. Shep.
Trey Yingst live tonight in Jerusalem. President Trump calling his former fixer Michael Cohen weak, a liar, and not very smart. So why did he keep Cohen as his attorney and fixer for those many? Top story, President Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, confessing that he had secret contacts with Russia while President Trump was running for office. The president called Cohen a liar. Rick Leventhal reporting live outside the federal courthouse in Manhattan, where Cohen pleaded guilty this morning. Rick?
And Shep, today's plea came after a reported 70 hours of interviews with Mueller's team and could land Cohen up to 5 years in federal prison. But he seemed relaxed in court this morning, according to our producer, who was seated in the jury box because of the overflow crowd. She says Cohen was smiling and waving at people he knew and talking to his attorneys and to prosecutors. And at one point near the end of the 34-minute court appearance, he asked the judge to stand and speak. The judge said the acoustics weren't good, so he should stay seated. And that's when he told the court that even though he stopped working as the Trump Organization's advisor and counsel back in 2016, he still had ties to then candidate Trump and was looking out for him and his political messaging when he lied to Congress about the contact with Russians regarding that Moscow project. When the president was asked about why he hired Cohen back in the day, here's what he told reporters.
If Cohen is such a bum, why did you hire him, have him on your payroll for 12 years, and have him do so much of your dirty work? Because a long time ago, he did me a favor. A long time ago, he did me a favor.
Cohen did not answer questions as he fought his way through the scrum of cameras and reporters outside the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse this morning, although I'm pretty sure as he was pulling off, someone asked him, what do you think is going to happen now? And he said, well, what do you think is going to happen, Shep?
What are we hearing from Michael Cohen's legal team?
Well, his lawyer, Guy Petrillo, said that he is cooperating, that Cohen is cooperating, as he has and will continue to cooperate. And his attorney, Lanny Davis, who was not in the court this morning, did tweet out, he wrote that Cohen has this morning reaffirmed what he has said since last July 2nd and told me many times since that he decided to put his wife, daughter, son, and country first. Today, he again told the truth and nothing but the truth. At Real Donald Trump called him a liar. Who do you believe? Of course, Cohen was back in court this past August when he pled guilty to 8 other counts, including bank and tax fraud related to his taxi business and campaign finance violations for helping orchestrate payments to 2 women, Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, who alleged affairs with then businessman Trump back in the day and could have affected the 2016 campaign. So Cohen pled guilty to those counts and to this count today, Shep, and he'll be sentenced on December 12th, could spend several years behind bars.
Rick Leventhal reporting live from the courthouse. The president saying again today that a pardon for his former campaign chairman Paul Manafort is not off the table. This as the Wall Street Journal reports that Manafort lied to the special counsel Robert Mueller about business dealings with a former associate in Ukraine who has ties to Russian intelligence. The Journal's parent company and Fox News parent company share common ownership. The president's former campaign chair is one of 32 people who has pleaded guilty or faced charges in the Russia investigation. Robert Mueller is looking into Moscow's meddling in the 2016 presidential election, possible collusion with members of President Trump's campaign, and whether the president himself obstructed justice. President Trump says there was no collusion and no obstruction. Back to our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, reporting from Washington.
Well, Shep, in addition to the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post is reporting that investigators are exploring contact between then-candidate Trump and Republican operative Roger Stone and the substance of those conversations. This week's developments now leave no doubt the special counsel is focused on the hacked Clinton campaign emails, the role of WikiLeaks, its founder you see here, Julian Assange, who lives in a London embassy fearing extradition to the U.S., and what Trump campaign officials knew, possibly in advance, about the release of those emails. On Hannity last night, Stone denied dealing with the WikiLeaks founder.
Did you ever talk to the president about Julian Assange or WikiLeaks ever?
Absolutely not.
So the president told the truth in what we learned today?
Yes, absolutely. We at no time did Donald Trump and I, either candidate Trump or President Trump, discuss WikiLeaks.
One of the questions that you raised earlier, Shep, is whether there is any kind of contradiction between the president's written responses to Robert Mueller and the guilty plea from Michael Cohen today. And a short time ago, we were able to speak to Rudy Giuliani, who confirmed to us for the first time that Mueller did ask at least one question about the Moscow real estate deal. And Rudy Giuliani said that the president's written responses do not present a contradiction with what Cohen has said and that they, quote, remain comfortable with the president's written responses. And that, of course, is the sort of the next step in this whole process, Shep.
Catherine Herridge reporting again from D.C. Stormy Daniels says her lawyer, Michael Avenatti, sued President Trump without her okay. Now Avenatti is responding. Reporting, Daniels, who claims she had an affair with President Trump years ago, now says her lawyer, Michael Avenatti, sued President Trump for defamation against her wishes. The president denies the affair. Now Avenatti is responding to Daniels. He says he's her biggest champion and has always been an open book with her. David Lee Miller reporting live from New York.
Shepard, Stormy Daniels might need a new attorney to resolve the conflict with her current attorney, Michael Avenatti. This morning, Avenatti told Fox News he has, quote, no idea why Stormy Daniels is criticizing his legal representation. Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Clifford, says Avenatti not only filed a defamation suit against President Trump without her consent, but that Avenatti also raised money on her behalf without her knowledge. Stormy Daniels made the allegations in a statement to the Daily Beast. The statement says in part, quote, he filed a defamation case against Donald Trump against my wishes. He repeatedly refused to tell me how my legal defense fund was being spent. Now he has launched a new crowdfunding campaign using my face and name without my permission and attributing words to me that I never said or wrote. Avenatti said that there were never any secret dealings, and he responded with his own statement. A portion says, quote, I have personally sacrificed an enormous amount of money, time, and energy toward assisting her because I believe in her. The statement goes on to say, the retention agreement Stormy signed back in February provided that she would pay me $100 and that any and all other monies raised via a legal fund would go toward my legal fees and costs. Instead, the vast majority of the money raised has gone toward her security expenses and similar other expenses. It is worth noting here that the Stormy Daniels defamation suit against the president was filed back in April. It was dismissed last month by a federal judge who ordered Daniels to pay the president's legal fees. Not clear is why Stormy Daniels is only now going public, claiming Avenatti took the president to court against her wishes. Shepard?
David Lee Miller reporting live from New York. Investigators carried out an enormous raid on one of the world's largest banks in connection with a money laundering case. About 100
inflation. Those will be the things that determine policy going forward. There will be no preset agenda of rate hikes, and that is good news for people who, well, the cost of money is a cost of doing business for them. Shep?
Jerry Willis live at the New York for Thanksgiving. Now prosecutors say a close family member murdered them all. The details coming up. Here, German news agencies are reporting now that the jet carrying the German Chancellor Angela Merkel to the G20 summit in Argentina made an unscheduled landing because of technical problems. The German news agency DPA reports the government Airbus turned around over the Netherlands about an hour into flight, was headed to Buenos Aires, but instead landed at Cologne in Germany. A replacement jet apparently on the way. 15-hour flight from Cologne, so the leader from Germany will be delayed. More ahead on President Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen. But first, other headlines, including a Fox Extreme Weather Alert. California can't seem to catch a break. Heavy rain, strong winds threatening to cause mudslides as people there continue to recover from the deadly wildfires. Chief Meteorologist Rick Reichmuth live in the Weather Center.
Yeah, or maybe this is the break with getting finally some moisture out there. Also getting some much cooler temps along with that. 61 degrees right now in LA with that cloud cover and that rain. And it's been really heavy. Some of the higher elevations just to the north of downtown LA have seen over 4 inches of rain from this storm. And that has caused some debris flow, a little bit of potential for some mudslides, especially in those burn areas. So, we keep on going from the fire conditions to too much rain. Overall, we want want to get the rain out there because the drought has been so significant. Obviously, agricultural impacts from that drought as well. Big snow coming in across parts of the higher elevations, and expect to see that threat for some avalanches. In fact, avalanche warning across the Sierra Nevada. Here's how this storm plays out. Go towards tomorrow evening. We potentially have some severe weather down across parts of the Arklatex, and then a big snowstorm. The same storm moves in across parts of Nebraska, and we're going to be talking about some spots, maybe 12 to 18 inches of snow, and eventually, Shep, that same storm system gets back out here across parts of the Northeast and the East Coast for a storm on Sunday. Shep?
Rick, thank you.
You bet.
A New Jersey family murdered, their mansion torched, and now, brand new, the brother charged with all of it. The county prosecutor announcing the charges today in what he described as a troubling and confusing case with unusual circumstances. The man on the right here is Keith Canero. Police say his own brother murdered him, murdered his wife, murdered their 11-year-old son and their 8-year-old daughter. It happened a couple of days before Thanksgiving. You may recall. We reported on it here as it was going down. The town is Colts Neck in New Jersey, about 30 miles south of the big city. A lawyer for the brother has said that his client is innocent. Jackie Heinrich reporting live from New York.
Shepard, prosecutors say the motive was money, and after that suspect killed his brother and his family, he tried to make himself look like a victim as well. This is Paul Canero, now charged with 4 murders, aggravated arson, and weapons charges. The first fire broke out at his brother Keith's mansion in Colts Neck last Thursday. Keith Canero was found shot to death on the front lawn, and investigators say the fire was set in the basement. Inside that house were the bodies of Keith's wife, Jennifer, and their 2 kids. Jennifer had been shot and stabbed. Both children were stabbed repeatedly. But it was the second fire that tied things together for investigators in what they are calling a strong case. They say Paul Canero returned to Ocean Township, it's about 13 miles away, after those killings, and set his own house on fire, trying to conceal evidence from his brother's house and make it look like the whole family was targeted.
Based on our investigation to date, we believe that the defendant's motive was financial in nature, stemming from his and the victim's joint business ventures that they owned and operated out of Asbury Park.
Now, prosecutors say they're confident that Paul Canero was acting alone. Each murder count comes with a maximum sentence of 30 years to life. Paul Canero is facing 4 counts, but prosecutors say they would have pushed for the death penalty if New Jersey law allowed it. Canero's lawyer has not returned our request for comment. Shep?
Jackie Heinrich reporting live in New York. A mom in California who's pregnant with twins and fighting leukemia says she's gotten her Christmas miracle. She's due in about a week, already has 3 kids. Sue Rabaka needs a bone marrow transplant to save her life. Last week, she called on folks to help when doctors couldn't find her a suitable match.
What I need people to do is join Be the Match. They send you a kit, a little swab for your mouth, send it back, and if you're my match, it's as simple as a blood draw. And that can possibly save my life.
People were listening. Tens of thousands of people joined the donor registry, and Susie found her match. Trace Gallagher has this story live from L.A.
Shep, you talk about beating the odds. There are 30 million people worldwide registered on BeTheMatch.org. None of them was a match for 36-year-old Susie Rabaka. Experts say Rabaka is unique because she has a combination of Caucasian and Hispanic DNA. So her friends and family went on social media asking people to register. That got picked up by traditional media. Then people like singer Carrie Underwood retweeted the story saying, quote, "Just saw the story. Who wants to save a life for Christmas?" Within a few weeks, an additional 40,000 people joined up on Be the Match, and lo and behold, one of them was not only a usable match, but a perfect 10 out of 10 match for Susie Rabaka. Watch.
It's an amazing feeling, and I'm so blessed, and I just want to thank everybody who has registered, who has prayed for me, all the supporters, the followers. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart to everybody. This is more than I could even ask for. It's my Christmas miracle.
Yeah, it's a big deal, but just getting the bone marrow transplant doesn't mean Rebecca is in the clear. The transplant simply allows doctors to use higher doses of chemotherapy than they normally would, which will kill more cancer cells. Then after the treatment, Rebecca will get an infusion of stem cells to restore the bone marrow. The initial bone marrow transplant will happen after her twins are born, which should be sometime in the next week. Shep.
A mighty good first step. Trace Gallagher live in Los Angeles. Thanks. Should news break out, we'll break in, because breaking news changes everything on Fox News Channel. Our coverage continues now with the best in business. Your World with Neil Cavuto on Fox News.
One more